for our reflection slide and conversation for this presentation, we know that you're just getting introduced to the course, so we wanted to start with some general conversation about what are your biggest goals and challenges that your organization faces with grant writing, and a little bit of a discussion on how you currently find funding opportunities. So, Asia, in your experience, what have you found in the organizations you've worked with? Like, what are the crunches? What are the goals that you've had to, achieve?
For sure. No, that's a great question. And a lot of the clients that I've worked with in the nonprofit space, some of the challenges that they've come across is definitely managing time. They have so many different moving parts, whether it's servicing the community that they have to provide programs to or products to, but also internally. And so really managing that calendar has been a
Mhm.
challenge for folks, knowing when funding opportunities are coming up, as well as do they have the proper team members in place to actually go ahead and begin to craft the grants, is what I've seen.
100%. Just like fitting into the workflow where so many of these nonprofits are making a tremendous impact on their communities. And then, they already have a 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 job. And then on top of it, they have to write this book report at the end of the day to get that funding to pay their staff, to pay for the rent, pay for food. So yeah, it can be a challenge. I think you're exactly right, where the organization is the biggest key and the biggest hurdle. I would just say, and I'm sure everyone in this class understands this, that just the crunches you get in the nonprofit sector where people are wearing multiple hats. At my previous organization, I was the associate director, but I would also be the part-time janitor when the kitchen got flooded. So just understanding that everyone's going to be a little bit busy. A lot of it's just like finding that time that you're dedicating toward grant writing to write a compelling proposal, making sure it's staying current, and also knowing when to be efficient. A lot of grants are repetitive. You're trying to get the same program funded by multiple different funders. So there are some pieces you can reuse, but you need to be mindful of when your programs are changing, when current events are changing, politics, just the needs of your program, and just knowing when you need that extra touch versus something that's a little bit more straightforward with an application.
Absolutely. And I love how you touched on the aspect of the different types of funders and making sure your proposal is tailored to who it is that you are submitting a proposal to. I think it's really important that nonprofits really consider and think about not only the different types of funders, but when they are accessing those funding opportunities and where to find them. In your experience of working with some nonprofits, what has been some challenges or resources that folks have had in even accessing those funding opportunities?
Absolutely. I would find that a lot of organizations know how to do the work really well, but sometimes that formality, some of the administrative burden that you need to kind of jump through the hoops for funders, that's where a lot of folks kind of get caught up to speed, thinking about having a checklist put together in terms of documents that you have put together, which we're going to cover in this course, making sure you know where your 501c3 letter is, where your budget is, if your staffing chart is updated or from a few years ago. I think that's like the biggest kind of hurdle for people to get to apply for some competitive grants. And as we'll cover in future conversations and presentations, when you get to applying for major competitive private grants or federal grants, you're really going to need to dot your I's and cross your T's to a higher level of I guess, finality. And I think that's usually the biggest hurdle, kind of like going through the door and making sure that you're grant ready and that you feel confident that whatever you're applying for, you have everything you have, locked and loaded, so to speak. I would say in terms of goals, I think, it's always a challenge. We get to the end of our fiscal year at an organization and then we start at zero
Yes.
all over again. We got to make sure we're paying everything that we need to pay.
Mhm.
And I think it's always that push and pull of what do we fund that we currently do versus, we're seeing things in the community. We need to expand programs, maybe start a new program. How do you balance those two at once? And I think, that leads into the challenge and the importance of dynamic grant writing. That's having your finger on the pulse for organizations and making sure that these grant applications reflect that.
Absolutely. And what I've seen in my experience consulting with nonprofits is a lot of benefits that people have found in managing multiple things simultaneously is also having frequent check-in meetings with their coworkers or their staff. It's so important that a lot of people have different understandings upon what's actually being worked on, even if it's not their particular department. There's intersections that still occur, and if someone's sick or something, the climate changes in terms of something that's happening in the community that they're servicing. It's really important to make sure that everyone has a understanding. That may not necessarily need to be the full scope, but what I've seen work really well is people being able to check in with extra information versus having to scramble at the last minute if an opportunity comes up.
100%. And yeah, just having multiple eyes, making sure you're getting input, from the community first and foremost into directing your
Absolutely.
programs, but also the folks who are on the front lines because, typically a lot of organizations, the folks who are writing the grants aren't always the ones who are serving the meals at the soup kitchen or running the
Yes.
food pantry. And the anecdotes, the firsthand observations that your staff members are getting are really key for both adding relevancy, adding that up to the date, I guess like updates and what you need for your grant applications, but also a little bit of that personal human touch and what makes your organization unique versus other folks who might be serving the same clientele in your community. So thinking about that last question, how do you usually find funding opportunities?
Oh man, so that's a good one. Finding different funding opportunities, I think, also makes a lot of sense for where you're going to actually be implementing your program. So, as far as geographical location, kind of understanding the landscape in terms of the funders that are there, both private and or federal level as well, is important. And different websites have been really beneficial in terms of databases. We'll get to it in a couple of the later modules, but don't just stick to Google. That's a key pro tip. Okay, don't just stick to Google. Definitely be able to stay with city websites, state websites. You'll be able to find some really great opportunities there as well in terms of what they're looking to put on or what they're looking to benefit for that community. And they may have proposals or bids out as well. So keeping in touch again with the municipality or the county level websites as well has been helpful.
Yeah,
How
I
about
agree.
yourself?
I agree. We're going to cover, like you said, some of the grant databases that you can access and you can use to look for different funding opportunities. But sometimes I feel like it's a fire hose where there's a lot of different opportunities that come your way. These grant databases, there's no one to rule them all. So
Mhm.
different ones are good for different levels or different types of funders, and you always want to kind of cross-check and make sure you're up to date. Funder timelines change, funding amounts change, funder focuses will change. So it's a lot
Yes.
to keep track of. But I think the main thing I would add on to what you had said, which was excellent, was tapping into your network. I think nonprofits are, the heartbeat of a community in a lot of ways in terms of serving folks who really need that extra support, need those services. You have members on your board who might be connected to other nonprofit organizations, connected to funders, thinking about what kind of banking services or credit unions you need. A lot of them have a foundational component. And I think just keeping your finger on the pulse. There's a lot of technical resources that you can use that we're going to cover in this course. And then just making sure you're doing that outreach. When you have folks come to volunteer, make sure you follow up with them. Think about how they can maybe serve with your organization a little bit more and maybe connect you to folks where, uncover some rocks of funders that you didn't think about previously, but you might be a great match.
Absolutely. So now that you had a chance to reflect as far as where you are in your organization in terms of being grant ready or grant ready to even begin the grant writing process, again, we want to make sure that before you get to the next parts of this module, you are definitely considering what your goals are for improving your grant seeking skills, as well as what are your biggest challenges with grant writing right now, whether you're an individual or you are an individual within an or active organization at the moment. And lastly, make sure that you have a lot of information written down with context about how do you currently find funding opportunities, because as much as there's challenges, you're probably, little do you know, already in a really great place with the work that you've already done thus far, and it's just about improving and building upon that. So we'll see you soon in the next couple slides.